All right. Let me pull up the chat window here. And good morning, good morning. Welcome to After Effects Basics. My name is Eli Rigatuso, and I am a native Omaha, Nebraskan. I am also Native American, first generation born off the reservation, but that's not why you're here today. You are here today because you want to learn about After Effects, and I am here to give you a basic introduction. Just a couple of things. I can't see any of you, so if you're waving or any of that, I'll wave back just to let you know that I know that you're there. But I can't see any of you. The way that they set this training up, basically you can see me and you can see my screen. And there is a chat and also Q&A available. So if there are questions that you would like to ask, wow, we have someone from the Philippines. Hello, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it. I did give a shout out. Yes, a couple of folks watching from the Philippines. That's amazing. That is so cool. Like, see these things happening online right now virtually. There's just unbelievable the reach. Also, Regine, we have a number of folks watching from the Philippines. Please feel free to ask questions. Again, this is a very basic overview of the platform itself. After Effects, along with Premiere Pro, are incredibly powerful. Geez, it's 1 a.m. in the Philippines. It is 11 a.m. here in Omaha, Nebraska, which is where I am and which is where DoSpace is. But this is really cool. How fun is this? Anyway, so the programs themselves, Premiere Pro and After Effects, along with a lot of the other Adobe Suite products, all work together. Which is really super cool, but kind of getting to the point of understanding that you have to learn a little bit more about the basics about the programs first. I would strongly encourage you to go to the DoSpace site and look for my Premiere Pro Basics class that I taught earlier this month. I'm actually going to be back again in March to do some additional teaching and slowly building onto some of the things that we've already covered. Again, if you do have some questions, please feel free to ask them. If they move kind of beyond the basic space, I'm gonna probably table those. I will say this much: there are lots of online platforms where you can go and learn quick things. And the best way to get into this is if you have the software available to you or you have the Creative Cloud, to get in there and just start playing around. Think about one thing that you want to do and then do a search for a video. You can find a lot of videos on YouTube where they'll walk you through one specific thing. And I've done that in my work where I might be doing something and think, gosh, I wish I could make it do this. And then when I go and search for it, I can find a snippet of a video that helps me kind of walk through. Basically, I'm gonna show you, for example, this is a very easy thing that you could do, is learning how to animate a ball across the screen, a bouncing ball across the screen. There are other things where you can get a little bit more in depth with what you're doing. I created this where I have animated birds flying across the screen. And here's the thing, I am not an artist. So what I did is I borrowed an image offline, someone's photo, and I adjusted the photo and used this photo to create this animated bird flying across the screen. And then I added some other textures and whatnot on this to make the birds fly. I have some sound effects that I have access to. These are migrating loons that I created for a piece that I'm doing. And all of these things, if you have access to image galleries where you may pay a monthly fee. You can pull some of these images off there. If you have access to Photoshop or Illustrator, you can draw some of these images yourself. Again, I'm not an artist, so I actually do pay to have access to other things where I can purchase someone else's art and then turn it into something that I need to use it for. My full-time day job, I do work at a university in Bellevue, Nebraska. I'm a video producer director. I'm actually the senior video producer director on the team. And we do a number of different things to support online learning for our university. So I use these programs like all day long, pretty much every day. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this first animation. Where did it go? I just wanted to go back to that bouncing ball. And there it is. Okay. So when you first come into this, into the program, you're not going to see these things over here on the left, which is your project window. The project window is where you're going to bring your elements into your project. And this is where you're going to pull your elements from. Now, there are some things where you might create something. For example, our ball is actually a blue solid that was created. And then I used some of the tools within the programs to make it a ball, and then use some of the tools for keying to have the ball bounce across the screen. Now, again, it's a very powerful program. There's a variety of different ways that you can animate. And one of the things that I would say is this: if your computer doesn't have a lot of RAM, you're going to limit yourself. So that's one of the things that you want to look at, like within your computer, you want to look at how much RAM you have, right? So RAM is your memory. Now, this particular computer has 16 gigabytes of RAM. I can tell you that for a lot of things that I do, that is sufficient. That works. Where it doesn't work is when I am asking to have it, say, for example, key something out on a green screen and animate words. So if I'm trying to do some of those things together, it bogs the systems down quite a bit. And so I will not do some of those things all together, which is the beauty of After Effects. I can actually create this bouncing ball, right? And I can then output the bouncing ball, maybe with no background at all. And then I can pull that snippet of video back in once it's been exported, and then put it in whatever I want to use it. So you want to be very familiar with how to layer different things as you're thinking about what it is that you want to do with the program. You might want a storyboard. So kind of like, make little windows and then draw out, and they can just be sketches. You don't have to be an artist to do that. I do see here that Regine asked what apps I use. I actually use the Adobe Suite. I use Photoshop, I use After Effects, I use Premiere Pro and Illustrator. What's great about a lot of those, using those all in conjunction, is again, I can connect them all together and make them all kind of work together. So if I have something that I created in Photoshop, for example, and I bring it into After Effects, I can go into After Effects and then click on that item, and it'll take me right back to Photoshop to edit that. And then those updates are automatic within each of these programs. So the way that they created the programs is really cool. And I'll kind of give you an example of that just real quick by showing you one of the things that I've done for my work. Okay. So I did a welcome video for one of the classes that we have at the university. This background image here is B-roll footage off of a stock video and photo and music library that we pay an annual fee to use this within our courses and whatnot. Now, this is a relatively simple thing where I have come in here and animated through. None of this is keyframe or there is some keyframing happening here, but with some of the images that we pull in here at some point. But this is, we're layering things, one thing on top of another. These are very simple animations that we, the thing that's really great about After Effects is I can create animations with text, where Premiere Pro will allow me to bring in text and only animate all of it in one way. Well, I can actually take this and I can animate all of these things individually. So each of these letters can be animated individually. So again, it is a very comprehensive program, but I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here. So again, if you have some questions that are basic questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So again, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing here. Basically, what we're seeing here is we're seeing our preview window. So this main window is our preview window. And so that's going to show us all of the action. Now I can click on this bouncing ball, for example, and this is the layer of that bouncing ball. Now I'm not seeing anything because that layer is, what's contained within that layer is a cutout of a colored layer, okay? So now when you look at this view, you can see here, this is the ball up here, right? And anytime I move this ball around right now, it's gonna create a new key point within my animation. And so kind of want to be careful when you're doing that so that you don't actually move something that you don't want to move. But so I'm going to show you quickly. Well, no, I'm not going to do that. Anyway, so we have our project window. So that's where all of our elements are going to live that are included within whatever timelines we're working on. Up above here, we have our tools. We have our selection tool, which basically does exactly what that says. It actually selects items on the layer, and we can actually go in and select and edit different points along this timeline. You do want to make sure though that when I click here, this is happening down here on the timeline at this point, right? So at this point is where that happens. If I clicked on that point and didn't move my cursor here or where I'm at on my timeline down to that point, when I move that, it's going to move it in a different place. So anyway, just kind of have to build on. So we're going to build on. Anyway, we're going to go back up to our tools. We have our hand tool, which basically, again, is going to move all of this around without impacting any of the elements that are here. We have a zoom tool, so we can zoom in and zoom out. You can actually also do that without clicking on that tool by just scrolling with your mouse, with your little wheel on your mouse, and that will allow you to zoom in and zoom out and get a closer look at where some of these things fall. We have our rotation tool, which basically, again, allows you to kind of rotate around if you're working within a 3D space. So some of these things are only going to work if you are within that 3D space where you're creating something 3D. There's the camera icon, which basically is you can set up cameras in After Effects, and then you can make those cameras move through what it is that you're creating. So again, these are some of the more advanced features. This feature, the pan behind tool, which is your anchor point. I am going to tell you a little bit about what that means. So if we pull this ball here, this is our anchor point. Now, what's really interesting about the anchor point, you can move this anchor point around, but it is going to impact how that ball moves on that timeline. So it is going to make a difference, but you can move that around. Where that's important is, for example, the birds that I showed you. In order for those wings to flap correctly, I have to place that anchor point where there might be a joint, right? So your wing, when it flops like that, right? The anchor is in the would be in the elbow area or elbow shoulder area, right? I mean, you could also then create an anchor point for a shoulder. So, or for an elbow, my body parts, I've got them all backwards this morning. I think I'm intimidated by the fact that there are so many people here from the Philippines. I don't know why, I just am. Anyway, so you can move this anchor point around, which does impact how something is going to behave when you create your keyframes, okay? We then have this here, the rectangle tool, which there's other tools. So if you see a little arrow, there are other tools that live within that tool. So basically, I'll tell you that this tool here was the tool that I used to create my ball from a solid, right? And we'll see that here in a second. So there are other tools that are embedded within there. And those tools are real great because if you want to create something that has rounded, like a rounded rectangle, you can create something with a rounded rectangle. Jason, they don't offer certificates, but they will email you a validation that you came to this training. I believe that is what they do. There's the polygon tool, the ellipse tool, there's the star tool. So you can actually create a star and you can put in as many points as you want on that star. So those are all things that help you. And if you work in Photoshop and some of the other programs, those make it easy to create elements faster so that you're not sitting there trying to draw out a perfect star when the system will do it for you. So yes, they do not give out certification. If you do need proof that you attended, you can email proof of it. They can email proof of attendance. Send that to programs@dospace.org. Okay, so then we also have the pen tool where we can go in and we can create things very specific with our pen tool. And there's, adding vortexes, deleting vortexes. We have a feather tool available under the pen tool. We have our text tool, which basically, if you have it set to the main portion, your text is going to type across. So when I click here and I type my word, it's going to type it across. Now I can also switch that up and I can make my words go the vertical way. So two different ways in which you can use your text, horizontal and vertical. So text tool is pretty powerful in that regard. And again, makes it easy for you to just go ahead and type out something that you need to type out quick. Sure win. I'm so glad that you're all here from the Philippines. That is just so cool that you're up at 1 a.m. even. Okay, so delete that. Next thing is we have our brush tool. So we can actually go in here and paint right on our palette here, right on our image with the brush tool. We have the clone stamp tool. Some of these tools are also similar tools that are used within Photoshop. So if you use Photoshop, the learning curve isn't as great when you come into a tool like After Effects. We also have a roto brush tool and a refine edge tool, which is really cool in when you're looking at video, because you can go in here and you can put someone, say you didn't shoot someone on green screen, but you want to be able to key out whatever background they're in. Now that's pretty extensive because I could say, for example, key myself off of my background that I have here in my house, but I got to go in and I got to create that mapping all the way around me. And some of these tools make it a lot easier to do those things and a lot more efficient. We also have a puppet tool. The puppet tool is nice. For example, in the animation of the bird, I could use the puppet tool to put pins in different places so that maybe I want the wings to flap differently, right? So that's what the puppet tool would do. And these are all things that are automatically built within the program. So doing some of the animations that you might want to do are easier because of the tools that are built within the program. There are some audio tools within this program, but I'll be honest with you, I don't necessarily use audio for anything other than how to place or where to place different things within my timeline. We have effects and presets. So there are a bunch of different effects and presets that you can use within the program, which is really cool. You have some animation presets. And each of these does a different thing. Some of these things work with text only. So you have your text animations. So you could actually create text on your timeline. You can, and then automatically make it do something just by dragging and dropping some of these text, these created text animations. So that makes it real nice, especially if you're wanting to work quickly. You can add these animations, and once you start to kind of get used to how some of them work, you'll find yourself kind of going back to those animations over and over again. Cedric, if you send an email to programs@dospace.org, they will confirm your attendance, but there is not a certificate. So thanks again for asking that question. DoSpace will continue to let y'all know about that. Okay, so we have a variety of different pre-built effects and presets, which are really cool. And again, these are things that in some cases will only impact video or still images that you're putting within there. Some of them don't work with text. They have some pre-built ones that are just for text only. So again, it's one of these things where I always tell people, play with the stuff. Just get in there and play with it. You're not going to break anything. It's not going to break your computer. I would especially not play with it if you're actually working on a project where you need to get something done. But definitely take the time to get in there and play with it. Again, especially if you're already paying to have the whole Adobe Suite, just get in there and play with it. And that's mostly how I taught myself how to really get in here and use some of these things. It's just like being curious about how something might work and deciding whether or not it's something that's going to make sense within my project. Okay. So we have our animation presets. We also have different ways to just add a quick blur to something. I did that when I was working with the crane elements that I showed you. So some of the birds that are pushed back in 3D space, not truly 3D space, but it occurs as 3D space. I might throw a blur on them because they're further away from the camera. But again, within After Effects, I could make my camera also move through these birds and make the birds as it's passing become clear, right? So as this camera is coming through, this bird becomes clear, but then he starts to get blurry as he goes away, right? So really I always say that these programs, the only limits to these programs come with what kind of limits you might have on your own imagination. So if you have a wild imagination, more than likely, you can create pretty wild things here within this program. So there is a variety of different blurs and sharpens that can be applied. We have, again, there's these Boris effects and Mocha. These effects sometimes are plugins that you have to pay additional for. So they don't always necessarily come with these plugins. A lot of the plugins that do, like Cinema 4D or Cineware, that actually does come with the program. However, it's limited unless you pay for the full plugin. So they come with that, but there's additional things that you would have to pay in order to make those things work the way that you want to. And if you are if you are someone who wants to get into 3D artwork, it's a powerful thing that's built within After Effects. And if your company will pay for you to have that access, I say get it, because I actually did use a number of different things that I turned into 3D using Cineware or the Cinema 4D and Cineware, and it works really well. And I'm not a 3D artist, but to be able to have that available is pretty cool. So it's nice to have that there. You can go in and color correct. And again, there are immediate things that can happen right away by just dragging and dropping these onto your different elements that you pull into your timeline. There's distortions, there's expressions, different things that you can generate with these. Again, and it's a matter of going in and playing with them, dropping them onto your items that are on your timeline. So again, now let's talk a little bit about these items down here. These are basically all have to do with this view, okay? So right now, so this basically is going to, this is how we're looking at the timeline. If we want to look at it in full, right? That means it is exactly how it's going to look when you export your video. So it's very clean, it's very crisp. I can tell how it's going to look. But when you preview your timeline in full, it may take longer for the RAM to catch up to show you that animation. Now, the more complex your animation is, the more movement that you have, say, within your text or also a 3D ball, that sort of thing, is going to make the computer work harder. So it's really nice to be able to actually flip this down to quarter view. And as you look, it's got a little soft haze to it. That's not how the video is going to look when you export it. That's just using less RAM so that you're able to work faster within the program as you're moving along. This here basically is a quick way to kind of zoom in and zoom out of your screen. So I can be at 50%, right? And this is nice for if you, for example, when I pull this off, see where the ball is actually there, but it's not within my preview window. Let's say I have 2 or 3 or 4 different balls and you want them to start from a different place on the screen. To be able to zoom out and look at this, where are they coming in from and all of that, that makes it a lot easier when you can kind of zoom out. Now, if you're getting into more complex animation, this is, again, a great tool for being able to see where things are coming from and where they're going. This is where we can set up and we can say, where is the title safe action? And that is if you're, using this program, if you're using this program to output something that you're going to have on television, for example, it's good to have this title safe on here, because when you do your text, this doesn't apply if you're going straight to the internet, but if you do your text, you want it to fall within these lines so that when it goes to broadcast, you're not losing it, especially for folks who maybe aren't watching something in high definition. Staying within and understanding title safe actions is important, but not necessarily as important if you're going straight to the internet. You can also create grid lines. Grid lines are nice. And again, these are not on your video. These are just on the screen, and they're nice to have so that you can see where things are falling. You have your guides that are nice to have as well, so that you can kind of guide where things are being placed. And you can say, for example, if you want all of your text to show up on the same line, you can use different guides and rulers. So those are nice as well. This one, I believe, is, I'm not sure. I don't even think I've ever used it. Toggle mask and shape path visibility. Okay, that's what that is. So that's what that means. So if we do this, that is telling you there's a mask on that, right? And there is a mask because I told you this was a, oops. If I delete this mask, that is the actual layer that I created before I created my ball and put a mask on it so that I could create a ball. Super easy to do. But this is what shows us those guides. So there's the mask. And what the other thing that's really cool about knowing that and seeing that is you can actually also, not only can you animate the ball moving, you can also animate the mask and how the mask responds within this. Because, you know, when a ball bounces, like, yeah, a super ball, we don't really see it kind of mush down as it bounces. But maybe this is a softer ball. So when it hits the ground, it might squeeze. So we can create those types of effects within this program. And you can see how that mask would animate along that timeline as well. This is basically telling us where we're at within the timeline. So here's our time. And there's different ways to display time. I always leave it in this frame and second and minute. So it goes frame, second, minute, and then hour. I've never produced anything longer than, say, 25, 30 minutes. So I've never had to go that far, but you can actually change this display to read in different ways as well. So you can do a command click to have an alternate display on the way that your timeline time reads. This will allow you to take a snapshot of the screen if you want to, say, add other elements. Say, for example, you want to take a snapshot here because you want to go into Photoshop and you want to create some really cool graphics to lay over this particular place within this timeline. You can take a snapshot of this particular spot in the timeline, bring that into Photoshop, and then add whatever it is you want to add, and then remove that image as you add your text or whatever you're adding over that, and then bring it back in to After Effects and then add animation. Let's see here. This will show a snapshot if we take a snapshot. We can also zoom into a certain region of interest. If you work in, say, Illustrator, that would make sense to you, because in Illustrator, if you're working on something that's going to print, it's a very large thing within Illustrator, and maybe you want to zoom in and do something really, really close, you can do that. That's what that will do in this as well. The other thing that you can do here is I put this on a background or on black, it automatically will show up on black. But really, I can export this to have no background so that I can bring it back in. And there's literally where you see the boxes, you would see nothing. So I could pull this ball into another video and have it fly across the screen. And then I'm not having to recreate something over and over and over again. Active camera is really great when you are wanting to do something, say, in 3D, because what that will do is it will give you views, and I'm not in 3D right now, so it's not going to actually show us that, but we can look at different views if we have our camera set to see what that camera is seeing from those different views. That's nice because you can go in and animate something very quickly and easily and see from different perspectives how that's going to look and where that's at. We can also do these different views. So basically it looks the same in everything because it's a flat image. So we're just looking at one view. So there's some other things there, but again, they're a little bit more advanced than a basic tutorial like this one. So here's what I'm going to do. So we have our bouncing ball. I am going to, if you right click on any of these areas, it also gives you some quick tools, right? And you can basically do that, not as much so over here. I mean, you can see these things. You can close these panels if you want to close these panels. You can also change your view. So you can change how this layout is, so your workspace window can be changed. If you're just doing animation, you can change it to only have the tools that are necessary for you to use if you're doing animation. If you're doing some color changes, you can have it that way, set up that way. For myself, I basically use it this way because these are the tools that I use the most. But again, and you can also create a workspace that works for you by selecting or deselecting some of these items when you go to this window. So, I mean, again, the possibilities are endless when it comes to the power of this program and what you can do with it. Um, so quick keys, and there's a whole variety of quick keys, and I'll actually cover those real quick as well. So if you want to open a project, you can actually do your quick key, which is a Control O if you're on Mac. They're different if you're on a PC. And there are, if you go to Google, you can type quick keys for After Effects, and it'll give you it'll give you all of the quick keys that are available. Do you know some engineering webinar and aeronautics webinars? You know, Cedric, I don't. I don't really. I don't know if DoSpace has any of those types of things. And I'm not sure when you say engineering webinars, if you're what you're looking for specifically. This one is not that though. So, but no apologies. And DoSpace doesn't have any of those types of things either. So, but again, you know, YouTube is a really great resource to find just about anything. I've actually created videos on topics that I know nothing about, and I have been able to create some pretty cool videos for our instructors by going and looking for different things on YouTube about a certain topic. I didn't know a whole lot about different things that have to do with IP addresses, and I found some really cool videos on YouTube, and then I went and created my own elements and created a really cool video for working with our 3D animation team for one of our courses. Cedric, no problem. Thanks for asking the question. It was not a problem at all. Sherwin wants to know more about 2D and 3D animation. You know, Regine, to be honest with you, After Effects is a really powerful tool for doing animation. And again, it just depends. Are you wanting to do 2D animation or 3D animation? If you're just looking at doing 2D animation, then this is a really powerful tool for that, because you can literally go in here and keyframe individual pieces. You can literally make a stick figure walk across the screen, and you can keyframe different parts of someone's leg even. Yes, so you can go to DoSpace's website at dospace.org to see all of the other things that they offer. So I would say if you're wanting to get into 2D and 3D animation, that this is a great entry point if you are able to afford to pay the monthly fee to have access to Adobe CC. Again, like I said, you do want to make sure that you check your RAM on your computer prior to purchasing. I know that Adobe does offer some discounts. If you happen to be a student or a teacher, you can get discounts on the project, on the platforms. Sherwin, you know, some of laptops are actually really powerful. So, you know, again, it's just a matter of going and looking at your laptop to see what kind of RAM your particular laptop has. Is it a Mac or is it a PC, Sherwin? PC. Yeah, you can actually go into your PC and look at your, I don't know exactly, I can't remember because I don't have a PC right now. I think if you right click on your desktop, you can go in and take a look at, like, you know, your hardware and your software and all those different things to see how much RAM your laptop has. Actually, one of my coworkers works on her laptop. When we went out for the pandemic and we're all working from home now, she has been editing on her laptop. And there, like I said, though, there are some things that are harder to do if you don't have a lot of RAM. So if you have something that has maybe 6 GB of RAM, it's going to be very different. And you can actually even go into, say, After Effects, for example. You have your preferences in After Effects. And you can go in here and you can actually tell the program how much RAM you want it to use when you're doing your previews, right? So this is basically my total memory that I've assigned to After Effects is 8 GB, although I know that my computer has 16, so I can actually go in here and change some of this, some of these settings if I need it to be more powerful. So you can go in here and again, it's one of those things where you don't necessarily need to understand all of these things. But it helps you, for example, grids and guides. How do you want those grids and guides to look, and what color do you want them to be? Only Core i3 now. Yeah. Yeah, so you might want to consider maybe investing in a more powerful. And Regine says, in PC, you click the Windows pause break so that you can see the RAM. Okay. But these are all great things here within your preferences, because this is going to allow you to color the grids and guides the way you want to color them. You can label different things. So here are the default labels, and that basically is how do they show up within the program, right? So this ball comes up as red. I can actually change that label to any color that I want it to be. If you add multiple masks to something, it's gonna give each mask a different color. But you can change all of these different things, how your camera shows up, what that's going to show up on the timeline to help you stay a little bit more organized. Media and disk cache is a great thing to understand, even for your more basic user, because you want to make sure that you're emptying the cache consistently. And basically all you're doing is you're taking any of those preview files that were created and you're deleting them. And you want to do that kind of consistently, but that helps to save up on how much the computer is actually holding and using. That will slow down the system for you. And so if you go in here and clean these, and I just do this pretty routinely. Regine, if you have 4 GB of RAM, excuse me, it will work, but I will be honest, you're going to find certain things when you start to get into the program a little bit more. Like, for example, let's say you want to have your name animate on, right? So let's say you use a cursive font on the screen and you want to use keystrokes to make your name animate on as though you're writing it right on the screen. That's going to take up more RAM than if you just have your name just crossfade on, right? So you want to think of it in terms of what exactly do you want? Yes, 8 GB or above would be better, as Ocho says. Thank you, Ocho. So these are some of the things that you want. Again, I wouldn't let any of this stop you from trying out the platform, going in and playing with the platform, thinking about what it is that you want what you want your end result to be, and seeing if your computer can handle it. Again, you can create individual elements and export those elements and then bring them back in, or you can export these elements and then bring them into Premiere. And that will not use up as much RAM as if you do, like you would in, say, After Effects. How you video is previewed. You can change the appearance of the program itself. So right now I'm in dark mode, but you can change that into a light mode or a lighter mode, totally up to you. How our new project's going to show up, your auto save. Ooh, this is a super important thing. If you remember anything from this webinar, remember this. Go in and set your auto save, because and actually even, save every 20 minutes. Sometimes you can make a number of changes within that 20 minutes and maybe your computer crashes and you're going to lose them all. So, doing an auto save, I would say when you're first starting out, I would set the auto save to 5 minutes, and then it'll auto save 5 versions of that particular project as you're working on it. So it's going to save it every 5 minutes, but it's going to delete some of the older ones as you go along. Now, again, and the reason for doing that would be so that you're not having to remember to actually save every so many minutes. It's just automatically going to do it for you. And then if you have, say, a power surge or something happens, or let's say you get a phone call and you have to step away and for whatever reason your computer crashed, it's going to actually save versions for you so that you can actually go back. And it's also kind of cool if you wanted to go back to, maybe you made a whole bunch of changes, but you didn't like the way that it came out. You could actually go back to one of those previous versions and then work forward from there as well. And those are all, again, when I create a project, and I'm going to come back to when I first create a new project, there are a number of different things that I do before I actually go in here and create a project. And one of those is to create a folder on your computer with that project name. And then everything that you save is going to go to that folder. Because when you take it off of your hard drive, you want all of those items to go with it. And if you don't create those things in advance, you could lose certain elements. It's really important, especially if you're building something really complex, to make sure that you're saving it all to the same place on your computer, and all of your auto saves and all of your preview files and all of those things are being saved to that same place, so that when you take it off of your computer to free up room on your hard drive, for example, you're taking that entire project off. And if you have to go back to it, you can actually bring it all back onto your computer. And other than having to recreate some of those preview files, you should be able to edit and fix that without a problem. But if you say create a graphic, but you save it somewhere else on your computer and you don't save it where your program lives on the computer or where that project lives on the computer, trying to connect it later can be really confusing. So make sure you do that. Let's see here. So here's the other thing in your memory. So it says installed is 16 gigabytes of RAM. RAM reserved for other applications, I set it at 5. And then, so I have 11 gigabytes of the 16 gigabytes that are reserved to work on After Effects or to use After Effects. So when I'm doing more complex things, I can do that. Now, Regine, if say yours has 4 gigabytes or 8 gigabytes, you could set, I would say maybe 6 of the 8 gigabytes to be working in After Effects. But there are a lot of other things that kind of go into play to create it that could potentially create issues. We have our different audio hardware that might be available and how that works. One of the things that I actually had to go in here before this started to set my audio hardware so that you could actually hear audio from Zoom. Now, when I end this webinar, I'll go back in and reset this to built-in audio output. But again, if you wanted to share something on Zoom with other collaborators, that's another thing that's really super cool, is that I can save this in my Adobe Cloud. and I can send just the link to the project name, to say a coworker, and I can save that all up into the cloud, everything that this project was created, and I can collaborate with a coworker who can then go and work on this same project without having to recreate any of it, if that makes sense. So that's another reason why I think Adobe Creative Cloud is a really powerful tool, especially if you're collaborating with other artists and designers. So that's another thing that's important. Let's see here, it's 11:50. Do y'all have some questions that or any burning questions about what we've covered so far? I feel like I've kind of thrown a lot at you for a basic intro to this software. No questions? Okay. So when you're looking at your preferences again, there are preferences for the program itself, and there are preferences for the project. And those are two different things. Looking at, say, our composition layers, and when we're creating different compositions, there are different settings for those compositions as well. I should have been asking, can you see the composition settings that I'm looking at? Can somebody confirm that for me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We can see it.
Okay, and you could see those other settings as well, correct?
Yes.
All right, because I was just looking at this going, ooh, is this, because I noticed it's not showing you the file and all those things up above here. But anyway, your composition settings are also really important to keep in mind, because, and you want to think about, where is this ultimately going to end up? If this is going to end up online, you don't necessarily have to output it at a high resolution. You can actually set it at a lower resolution for that. But again, this is just for the actual composition that I'm working on. So this composition is in 1080, 29.97 frame rate. 29.97 frame rate is basically the kind of a universal American frame rate for television, if that makes sense. But again, a lot of those things can be changed. Aspect ratios can be changed. Again, our resolution, that's only the resolution that you're seeing in After Effects. That doesn't impact your output resolution. And then again, we can change our background color here. So within that composition, if you want that background color to be something else, because you don't like the blue on black, you can actually change that here within your composition settings. There's some advanced composition settings that I honestly don't ever use. We have a 3D renderer. So you can actually change this to either Classic 3D or Cinema 4D. But again, I will tell you, Cinema 4D is going to use up more RAM than if you're using the Classic 3D editor. Now, the Classic 3D editor will also limit the things that you can actually create, whereas Cinema 4D gives you a more expanded ability to create 3D animations. So again, it's a blessing and a curse. You can look at it that way. This also is other options where we can change our comp size. And then a little bit of explainer around what that is. So it's going to tell you a little bit more about what you're going to see and what you can do with these things. So switching to Cinema 4D, there are certain things that are enabled, but then there are some things that are then disabled when using Cinema 4D. So again, it just kind of depends upon what it is that you want to create. And if you think about what your finished project is going to look like and how you want that to look, you may have to create separate pieces of your animation and then bring them all together. And then that's a way to kind of work around maybe your limitations with your system and your RAM and all that. Sherwin, what is the best requirements in Adobe After Effects. So when you say best requirements, what are you talking about? What are the best requirements as you're working within the platform? Or are you talking about when you're exporting from the platform? Both. Well, I'll tell you, when you're working within the platform, I would say you also want to be thinking about where are you exporting to, right? If you're exporting directly to the web using 4K resolution, you may not need that much, right? When you're using 4K video as opposed to DSLR video that's at 720p or 1080p, again, you're going to be using more RAM to play back some of that video, especially the 4Ks and all that as you get higher. So you don't necessarily need to be working in 4K in order to output a nice, beautiful finished project. We shoot in a 1080p with the Canon cameras that we use at work, but we edit in 720p and we output at an H.264 that is a little compressed. It still looks really, really great. And you wouldn't be able to tell that we compressed it because it's shot at such a high frame rate and such a high resolution that you can actually, kind of bring that down and export it so that you're getting through things quicker. And maybe it's creating and exporting a smaller file, because you export in 4K and you're looking at gigabytes. If you take something that's shot in 4K and you export it in 720p, then you can make a smaller file that then uploads quicker, and it still views the same on YouTube or anywhere online, if that makes sense. So again, you have to be thinking about, like, where is it ultimately going to end up? And how do I want to look when it gets there? But with some of these newer cameras today, I mean, even with the iPhone, shooting on the iPhone, I've shot some things on the iPhone that we've used at the university, where I'm maybe interviewing someone and doing a 2-camera angle, and I'm going from a very expensive, high quality camera to, say, the iPhone, and you really can't tell the difference in how I am treating the video when I bring it into these platforms, the color corrections that I might make, or the tweaks that I make to the video itself. So, I mean, and it's trial and error. It's trial and error. You're welcome. Thanks for asking, Sherwin. Anybody else? We have a couple minutes left, and I know Do Space has a hard stop. We're going to be a hard stop at noon. You can, however, if you want to shoot me an email or you have questions, I'm going to plot my email in the screen there. So elirigatuso@gmail.com. You can find me there. You can actually also find me on YouTube. You can see some of my work at, oops. Oh, shoot, I spelled that wrong. youtube.com/catchcreative out of Omaha. You can find me there. Sherwin, learning 2D and 3D animation. Yeah, and Sherwin, if you have other questions, please feel free to email me, and I will be happy to direct you to different things if you're wanting to learn more. Virgin, thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. Any other questions anybody might have? Yeah, Sherwin, absolutely. Anytime, shoot me an email. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have and help me. If I don't have the answer, I'll certainly do my best to provide you with a link to a YouTube video that might be able to help. Again, the only limit is your own imagination, especially in this program, because it's super powerful. You're welcome, Cedric. Thank y'all. It is now noon, so I'm pretty sure that DoSpace is going to shut us down.
Thank you so much, Eli. And thank
You're
you
welcome.
everyone for attending.
Yes, thank you. Take care. Have a great Saturday.
Goodbye. Bye. Thank you.